Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick, Caroline Hyde, and Taylor Riggs counting you down to the closing bell in no particular order. Here to help us take us beyond the bell, our global simulcast partners, Massar and Tim Stenovec, bringing together our Bloomberg Television, radio, and YouTube audiences worldwide to parse what happened today. And Carol, what happened today is we started off and we had a huge sell-off right at the open here, down about 2% pretty much across the board on the indices. They've kind of fought their way back here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happened pretty quickly, if you remember, Romaine, right at the open. We had that drop and then we bounced back. And check out NASDAQ stocks in particular. I mean, Tim, we actually saw some gains for at least just a moment today.
Yeah, it was wild because the story this morning was that tech was under pressure. The NASDAQ composite down more than 2%. But at one point early this afternoon, it actually reached into positive territory. And guys, I got to tell you, right before the close, just a couple of minutes, we are getting pretty close to the NASDAQ actually finishing flat. An absolutely wild day, especially for tech stocks.
Yeah, it really has been. And that narrative shift, is it less a fear of inflation, more, well, some profit taking? But I tell you what actually is starting to pay dividends is if you're shorting. Finally, if you've been short this market, you are starting to be paid off if you are bear. That basket of 50 most shorted stocks slipping now for 10 of the last 11 sessions. So best day to be a bear since December 2018, Taylor.
You might want to short those bonds. Yields are climbing for 4 straight days. I leave for a day, Romaine, and yields climbed yesterday, and they climb an additional 2 basis points today as well.
Welcome back, by the way, Taylor. You missed a lot when you're gone here. We should point out, 2069, that was the read on the New York Stock Exchange tick index at the start of trading today, right around 9:30. That was a record low. That's when you're basically measuring the down ticks and minus the upticks there. That was the bearishness that we saw coming into this market. You had a NASDAQ 100 that opened at 13,102. You had an S&P 500 that opened at 4150, got down to 4111. It's going to close here right now at 4152 and change. The NASDAQ 13,389. That's relatively flat on the day. Dow Jones Industrial Average taking it the hardest here, down about 1.4% at 34,270, Carol.
I love, Romaine, that you mentioned the tick index because, I mean, it can be volatile, it can move around, but if you're a chart watcher, you might have said, okay, maybe this is an indication that we bottomed out, and maybe that helps explain why we bounced up big time. But if you look at the major industry groups in the S&P 500, Taylor, most of them were down today.
Yeah, and for our radio audience, really unbelievable on days like today's when I try to highlight the winners and the losers. And unfortunately, the winners are all still in the red except for one, materials index. That's up 0.2%. But in the red, but still outperforming, it's software and services like cybersecurity companies, for example, right? ServiceNow, media companies, Carol, those are in the red, even though they were the big outperformers, as like Activision Blizzard, as we await earnings from Electronic Arts. And then finally on the red, it pretty much sums up the story for our radio audience. You're off 2.5% for financials, insurance, energy companies, as we're still trying to figure out the ripple effects of that Colonial Pipeline hack.
All right. Electronic Arts is crossing the Bloomberg, and maybe we could just do a quick check on that because we were certainly one of the earnings that we were anticipating here. So, whoops, let me just bring it up here. Electronic Arts, fourth quarter revenue, $1.35 billion, just crossing here. And let me just pull up the rest of the numbers. Sorry, my Bloomberg just went away here. So let's just go through them. First quarter adjusted revenue of $1.25 billion versus an estimate of $1.14 billion. And first quarter adjusted EPS of 55 cents versus 65 cents. That is the outlook. Fourth quarter, though, Caroline, we're looking at a beat, certainly on the top line there, $1.49 billion, and on the bottom line, fourth quarter adjusted EPS of $1.23. That too was a beat. The estimate was for $1.06.
Notable that we're getting some really forward-looking guidance from a company. A few have shied away from doing such, but seeing the 2022 adjusted revenue at $7.3 billion. So big beat overall in terms of that, but notable that we'll have to see how it continues to trade after hours. Of course, gaming stocks have been significantly hit by concerns about chip and supply chain issues overall. Electronic Arts basically down 4% over the last 3 months, Carol.
Yeah, definitely see some pressure here in the after hours too, down about 1.7%. All right, let's go through some of the gainers here. NortonLifeLock, this was your number one gainer in the S&P 500 today. Had quite a run, up about 9% at its highs today. This as a result, the stock EPS beat for its latest earnings. Also gave forecasts that analysts saw as strong. So this was the biggest move up in about 3 months. Callaway Golf, also a big gainer in today's session. That stock up more than 13% in today's trade. It's had quite a run this year, up about 40%. But again, we see a big EPS and sales report above estimates, and so that certainly gave some momentum. I want to mention Amazon, because if you looked at some of the big tech names today, they were under pressure certainly at the start of the day. Amazon, though, by the end, you can see just up about 1%, and we saw that playing out in a lot of the big tech names. And Activision, I wanted to mention because of Electronic Arts. Here's another maker of video games. That stock, we saw it being upgraded by BMO. Price target raised to about 116 from 104, Tim.
Yeah, Carol, you got the gainers, I got the decliners. Starting with the RealReal, the luxury consignment store, down more than 19% today. Shares slid yesterday after the company reported that the CFO would leave, but then BTI downgraded the shares, which didn't help at all. Tesla down nearly 2%. Lower today, as we learned that Tesla sold 27% fewer locally made cars in April than in March. There was also a Reuters report about Tesla doing less in China than previously thought as a result of those tariffs. That didn't help at all. Here's an interesting one. Virgin Galactic Holdings, the parent company, of course, of Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson's company, down as much as 21% earlier in the day today, but eked out something positive at the end of the day today. It was just a wild move from this company. It was lower after the space tourism startup said it encountered another technical problem, Caroline, that could delay a test flight. And then Novavax down for a second day in a row. This yesterday, after falling 8.8% yesterday, down more than 14% over a delayed COVID vaccine, Caroline.
Well, as Virgin Galactic ekes out a growth, Tim, so too does the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. They've been lower on the day, but as we said, this risk sort of cautious tone come back into the market. We saw the dollar actually manage to rise up as stocks pushed lower. Overall, on the FX market for our radio, for our YouTube, for our TV audiences, we're looking at a mixed picture in terms of the foreign currencies. They mean the yen up about 0.1%, but the Swiss franc, the other haven of choice, usually down by 0.3%. So not really a clear narrative, but we probably did see actually some of the moves go into commodity-related stocks as commodities were actually on a tear. Maybe this again fueling that inflation pressure that we've seen. Gas oil up by 1.4%, nat gas 2, WTI crude putting in a positive up 0.8%. But steel rising, copper once again well above 10,000 when you're seeing it traded in the London markets. Brent crude up by 0.6%. And the bond market, though, a clear sea of red when you're looking globally, Taylor. We're seeing yields move higher, whether at the German, the Swiss, the Belgian. That echoing the fact that we saw Europe really take hold of this inflation narrative. European stocks sold off hard, and bond markets also did in anticipation of maybe a Fed hike coming sooner than we anticipated.
Well, you kicked it off great. It's a global story, but it really is a U.S. story as well, with yields rising 4 straight days on the 10-year, 3 straight days on the 30-year of price lower, yield higher. What that means is we kicked off a 3-year auction today that was really solid. And this really, Carol, fits nicely with where I want to go. We have a 10-year auction tomorrow. Those auctions have been a key focus, but all the notes that I have been reading say the 10-year auction, yeah, okay, CPI, retail sales, all of those, we need to get through those data points in order to get some more real direction here as we think about inflationary forces, as we take a look at the health of the consumer, i.e. retail sales.
Yeah, well, listen, we're going to get a better read on inflation later on this week. We're going to get consumer prices. We're also going to get producer prices. And so, I mean, I feel like, you guys, the debate continues. And you do wonder what changes from day to day. I mean, we had 2 Fed speakers, one former Fed, Bill Dudley, and then you had Lael Brainard, you know, and one saying, don't worry, the Fed has plenty of time. And then you have Bill Dudley, Tim, saying, well, wait a minute, maybe the Fed's going to be too late. And then they're going to have to really move aggressively when it comes to rates.
Yeah, and the thing that's so interesting, Carol, is we talk to experts each and every day right here on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV. And what I keep hearing over and over again from the analysts we speak to is that word transitory every single time. And it's something that we hear from the Fed, and the concerns that they have about inflation. Well, it's just that. It's temporary. It's transitory, Romaine.
Well, yeah, I mean, but this was the whole debate. You come in this morning, you had the big Wall Street Journal column by Druckenmiller basically making the case here that, at least in his mind, is not necessarily transitory. You have this idea here that maybe the Fed is throwing a few too many logs on the fire. I mean, it wasn't just Lael Brainard pushing back on this, but we heard from Romaine Bostick as well as Harker. Harker, though, seemed like he was at least willing to sort of entertain the idea that this might be more than transitory. But this is basically why you're going to see whatever, I'm not sure what this is on the board, but this is basically what's going to end up happening when you talk about how you value these stocks.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff on the board.
I mean,
can our radio
apparently,
audience see that?
a monkey could make money in this market. That's what Stan Druckenmiller was saying earlier. I mean, are
Where
we
do you
all
get
monkeys? Because not everyone's making money in this market, I'm sure. But He was even
A
calling like the
stock-picking
end to
monkey,
the
I think,
dollar
would be
in
more
some ways.
Caroline, the
valuable
monkeys are
than the stock
calling saying they have
itself.
problems with you making that reference. I'm just going to say.
Brady Bunch, raise your hand if you drink oat milk, because I hear Oatly is IPOing.
Good Lord.
Our producer drinks almond milk. She gets screamed at. It's so bad for the environment. I can't believe she does that. So oat milk's the only alternative. Tim.
Romaine, what
Yeah.
do you do?
You're from California. You do this.
Exactly, I am. Yeah, but you're right about the environmental impact. Look, there was an article in the New York Times over the weekend that talked about all the different types of milk that are out there, milk alternatives, whether it's pea protein milk, almond milk, coconut milk. You got to look at the sugar, guys, because some of these milks have a lot of sugar added to
Raining
them.
on our
not
Oatly
all,
parade.
they're not all healthier than the
I
original
heard the
milk.
phrase pea protein milk. Is that a thing?
Apparently, I actually haven't tried it, but yeah, it does.
Sounds
Pea protein is so
disgusting.
hot right now.
Nut juice.
Let us know.
Wait,
let
what
us know
does
how that
Romaine
goes.
drink?
Silence.
He's not going to
He's
answer.
just laughing. He can't.
All right. We're going to leave it on that note. All right, that's going to do it for our cross-platform coverage here on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV, and YouTube. We'll see you tomorrow, same place, same time.